Hi, this is Mr. Elon, and in this video I'm going to be talking about part 2 of the portrait series, which is the subtle touch-up. Remember, part 1 is you just getting your picture taken, and it's labeled part 1 as a reminder that you want to keep that original shot. So here is my original shot, and I'm going to be messing with it and changing some basic things about it. Again, the idea here is that I'm going to keep it subtle. Before I get going, I am going to set up my toolbar over here a little bit differently. I really probably haven't talked about this in class very much. I know when we did the alphabet thing, I went over the layers, and we won't really use layers with this project. That's kind of the next project. One thing I would recommend doing, though, is going up to Window and enabling History. And if there isn't already this little icon with the arrows and these little dots, you'll see it pop up. And then I would kind of undock the history, just grab that window and stick it over here. We're not really going to be using adjustment layers. There are good reasons to use adjustment layers, and I don't really mess with them typically. In my opinion, it kind of just clutters up the layer menu. Again, there are really good reasons to use them. We won't typically use them. So I'm just going to drop the history right here, so it's its own tab. You've still got the adjustment layers tab if that's something that you know about and prefer to use. Your history is basically a giant list of undos, and especially when you get going in here. You might be doing stuff, you might be going out on a limb. Let's say I'm drawing, and then I change my mind and realize how stupid this looks. So if I go edit, undo, it'll undo one of them, but then it's edit, redo, it just brings it back. But my history is basically a little time machine. It's usually only going to go back about 20 steps. You can change that in your preferences, but I'm just going to say leave it as it is and save often. So I can just back up in my history to get rid of any of that stuff. Okay, so if I take a look at the handout, once again with part 2, I've got this thing that says goals with image and then tools and processes used. So I'm going to kind of cover all of these, eliminating flyaways, eliminating blemishes, minimizing complexion. I'll probably hit that at the end, and then brightening color, whitening teeth, stuff like that. And I'll start with the whitening of the teeth and brightening of the color of the eyes. I'm going to zoom in kind of frighteningly close here, mainly because that's review. In other words, the process of, for instance, if I'm going to go ahead and select my iris, and remember I can actually do both at once by holding Shift, so select my other iris, and then I can hold Alt and I can get rid of the pupil, and I could also, fine-tune the selection. Once again, I am using the lasso tool. In general, you're going to be doing a lot of selections, so it's a good idea on your handout to go ahead and highlight. Let me find my... it's a good idea to go ahead and highlight the lasso tool, which is the third one down, and the quick selection tool. Those are the primary ones you're going to highlight. Or that you're going to use to select. And then in the keystrokes sidebar, just go ahead and highlight Alt and Shift. Remember, that is how you add to or subtract from a selection. And then you can also highlight Control D, which deselects a selection. Okay, so once I have something selected, it is a very good idea while I'm still on the selection tool to hit Refine Edge. That is something that is not on your handout. Oh, whoops, wrong thing, sorry. So if you wanted to just kind of pick an area like right here and write about the Refine Edge thing, you could. But remember when I hit Refine Edge, and this is going to get scary looking. When I hit Refine Edge, it shows me the edge of my selection, and I can pull Feather up, maybe not that much. But once again, that is a way of getting any changes that I make to sort of photographically sync in with the area around it. Keep in mind, depending on what you're doing and what you're planning to do with it, you may want little to no feather, or sometimes you want a whole lot. So it just depends on what you're going for, but you don't, especially when we get into combining different images together, you don't want everything to have this furry edge unless it's actually supposed to be furry. Okay, now with this stuff selected, this may be surprising, but my eyes used to be blue, so I'm going to go in with color balance. That is, once again, actually before I do that, we'll just go ahead and highlight it. So in image and then adjustments, we have brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and color balance. And those are kind of the three big ones we're typically going to use in this class to change the look of things. And in general, you can kind of combine everything in here to achieve virtually any color. So now that I've got these selected, I'll zoom in even a little more. So I'm going to go image adjustments. Just real quick, I'll go over what the three of those do. Color balance should be review. It allows me to add and change color. So it is worth noting that with this being a subtle touch-up, I probably wouldn't want to take it past this. And even that might be a little striking, but especially when I go there, you can tell that's just going to look insane. And if I start messing with tone balance, it's going to get even more insane. So I don't want to do that. I want to keep it subtle. So just a slight boost is plenty. So I'll hit OK. Before I deselect, well, I'll go ahead and deselect using Control D. So you can see that it still looks pretty subtle. Another good thing about history is you can kind of quickly click between things to tell what kind of a difference it made. So if I, jump back to open, I can see, okay, yeah, they weren't very blue. In fact, my eyes just don't even seem to have much of any blue in them anymore. So if I can jump back between them and you can kind of see the difference. So before I deselected, I was going to show the other two. Brightness, contrast. Brightness is going to raise the brightness, which generally is going to make things lighter, but is also going to make color brighter. So sometimes you have to raise the brightness and then lower the saturation, which I'll show in a second. Contrast is the difference between the lights and the darks. You're probably not seeing a good sense for that, and maybe you are because you got some little highlights. So if I raise the contrast, it's more like it's just like whites and blacks, and if I lower the contrast, it's going to kind of gray everything out. I don't think I need to mess with either of those here. And then the other one is hue, saturation. Hue tends to change color like really monochromatically, like kind of dragging everything toward a certain color. It's hard to explain the difference between that and color balance. And in general, like unless I just want everything that's already kind of the same color to change to a different color, I usually just use color balance rather than hue. Saturation's a pretty important one. It is how bright or how dull the color is. And then lightness is kind of an outlier. You might use it sometimes if you are dealing with photographic assets and elements that are under or overexposed. In other words, if I take lightness up or lightness down, I know both of those look pretty weird. Part of that is just, all it's doing is just adding a pure white or a pure black filter over top of it. So again, if I was trying to fit this into an overexposed photo, I might bump that up, and that might be what I need to get it to look correct. So I don't think I really need any of those. I'll just cancel out of it, and I am good to go. Real quick, I will do the whites of my eyes. So once again, I am selecting, and in this case, I am sticking with the lasso tool. Select, 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 select. And I'm holding Shift. Don't forget Shift adds, meaning I can select multiple spots or change the shape of my selection, and Alt subtracts. Okay, with those selected, I can once again hit Refine Edge and bump Feather up. Hit OK. And then Image Adjustments, and in this case, I'm just trying to subtly whiten the whites of my eyes. I do not want to whiten them to a freakish degree, but the best way to kind of do this would be to raise the brightness, which is going to kind of lighten things, but also brighten the color, which is why, it's like starting to look really red in there. So I raise the brightness a little bit, hit OK, and then I'm going to go into saturation, and I'm going to lower the saturation. I'm not going to lower it all the way, or it starts to look like my eyes are filled with concrete. But if I lower it just part way, it's going to take some of that redness out of my eyes that raised when I raised the brightness. Hit OK, Control D to deselect, And once again, just to highlight the difference, I can backtrack to here and then go back to when I deselect, and you can see that's a clear difference, but it's still subtle. If I zoom out, it doesn't look freakish or unnatural, and that's what I want. So I could do the teeth too, subtle whitening of the teeth, and of course, that is if you even see your teeth. You might not have a very toothy smile. At one point I'm going to show how to take care of flyaways in the hair. You might not have hair or hair that shows. So it's not about doing everything, it's about doing what applies to you. Even if you are particularly beautiful or particularly stricken with flaws, no one's going to have a wildly more or less to do with this subtle touch-up. And in fact, a lot of people finish it wondering, did I do enough? It didn't seem like I did very much. It usually takes less than one period once you've got the hang of the tools and everything. For the teeth, because there's plenty of contrast in there, I am once again going to use the quick selection tool. I am going to change the brush size on that tool up here. And remember, I can once again use Alt and Shift to manipulate things. So it's getting a little too much in some cases. I'm just going to hold Alt and shave some of it off. In this case, it missed a spot on a tooth, which is a little weird. Once again, I know this is just review, but this tool finds differences of color and contrast. And you just kind of swath it over things. You don't have to draw around the edge. I hit Refine Edge, pull the feather up just a little ways, and then I'll kind of do those same things. Image adjustments, brightness, contrast, take the brightness up, not freakishly high, maybe somewhere around 30 in my case. That'll vary from person to person, so I don't want to tell you a number and have you stick to it. And then image adjustments, hue, saturation, and saturation down. Not all the way down, or it starts looking just, again, like stones in my mouth or something like that. In both cases, I added 30 or subtracted 30, and that should look perfectly fine. Okay, so that covers the selection tools pretty much. Now, the next tool I'm going to show, and we'll go ahead and highlight it right now. The next tool I'm going to show is the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to go in with my brush and highlight the clone stamp tool. And I'm also going to highlight the instructions for the clone stamp tool, and I suggest you do that too. The instructions, it's not a hard tool to use, but people sometimes forget how it works. And in fact, it's probably the tool that I get the most questions on, or people asking things like, it's not working. And it's because you have to hold Alt first to get it to work. In other words, the tool doesn't just work on its own. To demonstrate how it works, I'm going to kind of jump to part 4 of the series briefly. I'll undo what I do. But I picked the clone stamp tool. It looks like a rubber stamp that you use to void a check. I can control the brush size and hardness. I didn't talk about that. Hardness is the difference between a hard digital edge and a soft hazy edge. And in general, for most things, you want it all the way down. That's most photographic things. You will often raise it to varying degrees, but it would be very rare that you would want it all the way up when you're working photographically. If you're doing, digital illustration from scratch, that's a different story. Okay. So the instructions, once again, they're a little weirdly worded, but it says hold Alt and click once to lay a target, draw a square with this tool, and it will copy the targeted area. Which means if I wanted an extra eye in the middle of my forehead, I'm on the clone stamp tool, I hold Alt, and this little target appears, and then I'm going to hover over my eye right here, and right in the middle of it, I'm going to 3, 2, 1, click. Yeah. And now it looks like I'm kind of dragging the eye, but it's just kind of telling me this is where you laid the target. And if I come up here and click and hold and color, it starts adding an eye. And it fits in pretty well because of the fact that it's not perfect. I would work with it a little more, but it fits in pretty well because of the fact that I have that hazy edge. So again, that's similar to the idea of refine edge and feather when you're making a selection. Now, I don't want that. That doesn't make sense for my subtle touch-up. So I'll back up in my history. What I am going to do with it, and I'll zoom in, I got a couple blemishes right here. So I can be just kind of copying, not necessarily an object like an eye or a feature, but I can use it to copy neutral ground. So I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm getting rid of this and this. Again, if I have a mole or freckles or something like that, they're not; those aren't the kinds of things you need to be worried about. It's more short-term blemishes. You know, oh gosh, it's picture day and I have a zit. That's the kind of thing you take care of. So I'm going to hold Alt. I'm going to click real nearby. I'm going to let go of Alt. I'm going to move, and I'm going to color. And then it's gone. Now, it's worth noting. You might think, oh, okay, I'm just copying skin over skin. Well, this right here is skin, and if I hold Alt and click here and then move over here, notice how that kind of looks worse in a way. So I'll undo that with my history. That's why you want to copy nearby, and you want to be mindful of highlights and shadows. So I'll copy right here, over to there, and I'm good to go. It also mentions removing flyaways, and I would use this same tool to do that. So if you look at the edge of my hair, especially this bane of my existence right here, this horrible white hair popping up, but in general, I have lots of little flyaways kind of escaping my hairstyle. So the point here is not that I would give myself a haircut, but any, in other words, you could look at this as here is hair and here are hairs. So you're leaving the hair alone, but you're maybe kind of taken care of, or at least minimizing the hairs that are escaping the shape of the style. So, to do that, I'm going to just copy the background on it. And actually, I think you can probably see those okay. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I am going to lay my target right here. And then I'm going to come over here. It looks similar enough. I'm going to start coloring. And if you look to the left of the circle as I color, there's a very small little like plus sign. And that's telling me what I'm copying. And part of the reason I laid the target there is you're going to notice as I work my way this way, something weird starts happening. It starts copying more hair. In fact, I'm giving myself like double forehead. And that's because I laid my target right over here. I stopped coloring. I laid my target right over here. And as I worked my way this way, it started copying this stuff over here. So I'm going to undo that. Now this little thing comes back. That just kind of stresses the importance of relaying the target. So if I lay the target here, let go, move over here, and color, eventually I might see that my little plus sign is getting close to the actual hair, and I might stop and hold Alt and relay the target somewhere else. Or in general, I might just be mindful as I'm working of laying targets places where it's not going to like cause a problem. Now, one thing to be aware of with the clone stamp tool, and I won't make you watch me do my entire head, you get the idea. One thing to be aware of is repetitive patterns. You see right here where there was like, we have a different backdrop now, but this was just like a sleeping bag. So there was this seam right here, and that seam kind of pops up right over here. In fact, you see this gets copied right here. So you want to look out for those kinds of things and find a way to obfuscate them. So in other words, I'm just going to click right here and then just kind of overlap that so that you can't really see that repetitious pattern happening. All right, so that covers flyaways. The only other major thing is just the idea of minimizing complexion. So in other words, on my little handout, I took care of flyaways, blemishes. I did the whitening of teeth, whitening of eyes, brightening color of the irises. And again, not all of those things will apply to every person. So at this point, I'm going to put the finishing touches, and the finishing touches are going to be pretty subtle too. What I'm going to use for this is the blur tool. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight the blur tool right here. Blur tool. It looks like a little droplet. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to turn on... Oh, whoops. Yeah, it's underneath here. I'll talk about this probably in other videos, but sometimes, when your handout doesn't match the toolbar, In other words, under the paint bucket should be the blur tool. Here it doesn't even show the paint bucket. But that paint bucket is under there. You're not going to use the paint bucket or anything. But there are often other tools hidden underneath these tools. Anytime you see this teeny tiny little triangle in the bottom right corner, that means you can click and there are even more tools there. So the toolbar is just kind of like organized so that it's like manageable and not painful to look at. You don't want a billion tools there, and they kind of group like items together. All right, so I am using the blur tool. I am going to raise the size considerably. That looks good. And then strength, just so that you can see it on the video, I'm going to put it all the way up. I would say for this kind of thing, you would want it between 50 and 100%. And then I'm going to click and I'm going to hold and I'm just coloring with the blur tool. And you might not really notice much happening. I mean, it kind of maybe depends on the resolution of your, whatever screen you're watching this on. You might notice a little more if I do a second pass. So if I let go and click again and hold and do a second pass, maybe I'll just do a third just for good measure. The blur tool is subtle. Don't expect to be able to see dramatic changes. But especially if I zoom in even further, so now we're just looking at a field of forehead. While I'm zoomed in, in my history, I have 3 instances of blur tool, and if I jump back before them, notice that it does get a little bit harsher. You're seeing, maybe more pores or just generally more detail in the complexion. Blur tool is minimizing it. So, it's worth noting, and I'll just kind of back out here. It's worth noting that I still look human, I still have a complexion, and I would not want to be using the blur tool, like, let's say right here. If I do that, blur, 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 it's just going to start looking like a weirdly blurry photo, which isn't what I want. So anywhere where there definitely should be detail, where it's like the features of the face, I want to leave the blur tool out of it. Meaning I would just kind of take my blur tool, come on, there we go. I would just take my blur tool, and I'm not going to do it, but I would kind of work with it only on areas that are essentially just like flat patches of skin. Okay, and once again, that is the subtle touch-up. And if I zoom out of the whole thing, I didn't do all my flyaways or all of my complexion, but, I got most of it done. If I zoom out of the whole thing and I just kind of jump back and forth between the original, if you click the very top of your history bar, you'll revert. Notice again, that jump isn't very intense. I'll do it one more time. I'll go back to the touch-up, and boom. And it doesn't change all that much. So at this point, I would double check to make sure that you're in the right file before you save. If, for instance, you open the wrong or started doing this, like I did this over top of my original, so I could just go File, Save As, and save it as, Elin Portrait Touch Up at that point, and I'd be fine. You want to make sure, especially if you've done some work on one of your images, that you're not saving your progress on another part of the project over top of the progress you've made on one part of the project. That's it. Good luck with phase 1. Once again, it doesn't take all that long. It should be subtle, and once you finish it, you can go on to phase 3. I guess it's phase 2. So good luck.